Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is right here, everyone. Thank you for joining me, and welcome back to the channel. Guys, I just love it when Joe Rogan takes a big steaming dump on Scientology on his podcast. Joe Rogan, he has interviewed Leah Remini. He has interviewed David Miscavige's father, Ron Miscavige Sr., and he has interviewed Louis Theroux. He has interviewed Lawrence Wright, and he's done a lot of content relating to Scientology. And ever since, I can't remember who he interviewed more recently, whether it was Leah Remini or whether it was Ron Miscavige Sr. But whichever one of those was most recent, Rogan has actually turned down Scientology interviews ever since then. However, it doesn't keep him from bringing it up. And I love when he brings it up because it's always in a very derogatory fashion. And today he delivered once again. Today he published an interview with Neil Brennan, and on his YouTube channel, he publishes clips of the podcast interviews. And this one clip in particular goes right into religion and Scientology. And let me just show it to you. Let's take a look.
The wildest one is religion.
Go on.
That they're tax-free.
Oh.
The amount of money
Impossible.
a guy like Joel Osteen is raking in tax-free. Does he have to pay any taxes? Does he have to personally pay taxes?
Don't steal,
right, but
don't
the taxes
murder,
thing
don't.
is nuts because Scientology got it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they sued. They sued the federal government and they got tax-exempt status. And, that's wild because you know the guy who wrote it. Just one specific guy who is he's the most prolific author in human history. Mm-hmm. You know that? He published more works of fiction, but not that. That was all real.
No.
That's all real.
You guys got to take the day off.
And they get no taxes. It's pretty wild. I mean, if you're like a small Lutheran church and you serve the community and you put on charities and do a bunch of great things and you're like a real asset to the community, there's a lot of those churches and they should be tax exempt.
Other than like the Sea Org slave shit, I don't care about Scientology. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they charge for classes. I don't know. They kind of make you give them a tithe at churches.
Seems like it's working out for Tom Cruise.
It's working out for a lot of them.
Seems like it's really working out
that's
for Tom
what I'm saying.
Cruise.
Like, I don't care. Just don't slave people.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't kidnap Kelly Miscavige and all that shit. But like the rest of it I don't care about. The rest of it's not any different to me than any other religion.
It seems like it's real similar to what goes on in a lot of religions in a sense, because there's a lot of religions that force people to work as missionaries, and there's a lot of religions that ask things of people, and you have to tithe 10%. And
all right, well, they might mention Scientology again in this interview, but as far as this clip goes, that's all I've seen. That's where they stopped talking about it. So, isn't it kind of interesting that it's not nothing Neil Brennan thinks is particularly interesting to me, but I don't have any problem with Scientology other than the free winds ship. Like, Neil Brennan has no idea that the Sea Organization is actually a land-based organization that exists in every continent in the world, and that the free winds ship isn't the only place where Scientology abuses members, staff members, Sea Org members. And also, Rogan says that L. Ron Hubbard was like the most prolific science fiction author of all time. He said that a few times. You guys can fact check me on this. I do not think that is correct. I believe Joe is conflating, Scientology submitted for a few world records on behalf of L. Ron Hubbard. And I think it had to do with, it was like a multiplication of number of titles written multiplied by the number of languages that it had been translated into. And of course, despite there being only like 25,000 or 30,000 Scientologists in the entire world, Scientology has had, some of his titles translated into the most obscure languages that would never be necessary ever. Like, no one in that language has ever purchased a Scientology book before, but they specifically did this so that they could apply for certain world records on L. Ron Hubbard's behalf. Anyway, for sure, he was a prolific sci-fi fantasy author, but let's not give him any more credit than what he's already due. He was not the most prolific sci-fi writer of all time, but who really cares, to be honest? Now, Joe has told a story many times of how a bunch of years ago, his neighbor was a Scientologist, and Joe read Dianetics and all this stuff. So, Joe has some history in the subject, and also he's been in Hollywood forever, so he knows a bunch. He's known a bunch of Scientologists. But I'll tell you, two of Joe's closest friends have recently spoken out about their connections with Scientology. One of them was Bert Kreischer when he was doing who's the Bill Maher. He was doing Bill Maher's podcast, and Bert Kreischer divulged that his dad, his father, was a lawyer who worked for L. Ron Hubbard. And I even dug up, someone dug up the case and sent it to me. Yeah, Bert Kreischer's father had represented somebody who was suing Scientology and did such a good job, like they won the case against Scientology, did such a good job that Scientology turned around and hired him to represent Scientology. That's phenomenal. That's an amazing connection. And then Brian Callen, anyone familiar with the Fighter and the Kid podcast, anyone familiar with the Brendan Schaub, Bobby Lee drama that happened not too long ago knows exactly who Brian Callen is. Brian Callen interviewed Mike Rinder recently for Mike Rinder's press tour for his book, A Billion Years. And usually when Mike Rinder's doing an interview, the most interesting parts of the interview is Mike Rinder's answers. But in this case, Brian Callen, it was almost like he was interviewing himself. He spent most of the interview talking about his own experience with Scientology, which was interesting because I'd never heard of Brian Callen having any experience with Scientology. Brian Callen knows a lot about Scientology. Brian Callen, for 10 years, went to the Beverly Hills Playhouse, which was run by Scientologist Milton Katselas. This is an acting school in Beverly Hills. And this school was basically a famous recruiting pool for Scientology. It's how a lot of actors were introduced to Scientology. A lot of Scientology's most well-known actors have a lot of history at this place. And so Milton Katselas had introduced a lot of the Scientology concepts and terminology and practices into this thing. So anyway, who knew that Brian Callen was sort of a low-key, not really a Scientologist, but someone who was very familiar with it. And therefore reading Mike's book really resonated with him because he's like, oh my God, I'm familiar with all these concepts. I'm familiar with all these ideas. So anyhow, I hope Rogan does open himself up again to doing more Scientology topical subject interviews because he's clearly not shy talking about it. He's clearly not afraid of them. But I guess to some degree, perhaps he's just sick of talking about it. I think he got a rash of shit from Scientology the last time he had, again, it was either Leah or Ron Miscavige Sr. And anyhow, I hope we keep seeing, anytime I hear of Joe Rogan doing a dig on Scientology, you can be sure I'm going to clip it and show it to you guys. All right, everyone, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe